All right, well, good afternoon and welcome to the COVID-19 update meeting. This meeting is being recorded and will.
I just lost my sound. Did anybody else?
I did as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
All I can hear is Rick Hughes' heavy breathing.
Oh,
in
no,
your
no.
dreams, Largent. In your dreams. Nice haircut, buddy.
Hey!
I can hear Largent.
Nice.
You two
We can
should meet
always-
outside the meeting.
All
All
right,
right, Mitch, do you want to try that again?
yep. All right, well, good afternoon and welcome to the COVID-19 update meeting. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted online at wasac.org/coronavirus within about 48 hours. If you have any questions or comments, please use the chat feature located at the bottom of your meeting window. All entries in the chat window and this recording will be retained as a public record. If you would like to speak, please use the raise hand icon under the participants section. For those of you participating by phone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9, and today's moderator will call on you. If more than one commissioner from a county is participating in today's meeting, this meeting should have been noticed as a public meeting. Any guests in attendance should remain muted. Thank you again for joining us today. And now I'd like to welcome Jamie Budden.
Thanks, Mitch, and happy Friday, everyone. Go ahead and advance the slide, Mitch. Just a reminder, if you do have a question, to type it into the chat box or raise your hand. Next slide. Today on our agenda, we have some guest speakers to talk about broadband issues in Washington State. I know this has been a topic on a lot of our CARES funding conversations, as well as just kind of the impact broadband has, or the lack of broadband has had on folks either working from home, schools, all sorts of things. So I'm looking forward to our guest speakers. And then we have a couple of updates and resources for you all as well. And fingers crossed, we will end at 4:30 today. So next slide, Mitch. So it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Shelley Westall, who's the director for the Public Works Board, the broadband program. And I'm not sure if Russ is joining today or not.
He's on the call, it looks like.
Yes. Yep.
Fantastic. And Russ Elliott, who is the director for the state broadband office. And then both will be talking about broadband. So Shelley, why don't you go first and speak for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes or so, and we'll turn it over to Russ. And then we'll take questions for both of you after once you're both done. So Shelley, take it away.
Sounds perfect. And just so you know, now that my counterpart in crime is on the line, Russ and I have a comedy duo, and so we generally play off each other pretty well. So Russ, you can unmute yourself and interject at any point, as you know you can with me, so feel free to jump in.
Thanks, Shelley.
Yep. And glad to see you on the call too. And
Yeah.
I also want to say hi to Sharon Trask. I noticed that she's on the call, and she is a board member with the Public Works Board. So thank you, Sharon.
You're
so
welcome. It's so good to see you.
Nice to see you too. So a little bit about myself. I started in, I've been with the state off and on for years, but back in, mostly in healthcare policy. And then back in 2013, I started with a little project called FirstNet, the First Responder Network Authority, and started that program to deliver wireless broadband to public safety across the state. And so that's what we worked on for the last few years. I would say it was marginally successful. That program ended up, was a federal project, and they ended up partnering with the with AT&T, who now runs that part of the program.
The slideshow I did for.
And so, but it was a really great experience for me. And then I got to travel across the state and really get a good feeling for where broadband is available and where it's not. And, you know, touch bases with not only public safety, who have a different but compelling need for broadband, but also with folks and regular citizens that also need it. So I had a really good idea about where we need broadband and where we don't have it, and where the critical need is for public safety. But this gives me a whole different look. And the exciting part about the PWB broadband program is that for once, we're funding something. So we're actually looking at bringing projects to fruition across the state and delivering broadband to the citizens who don't currently have it. For those of you who don't know, I'll give a brief little background on the statute that created the Broadband Expansion Act, and it created Russ's office and then also the Public Works Board broadband program, and funded us to offer grants and loans for construction. So back in 2019, the legislature passed 5511, and that created both our programs and funded it. Our part of the statute is kind of interesting. It's pretty prescriptive, and it tells us what we can and cannot do. We're funded through the capital budget, so our appropriations for grant and loans are determined by the legislature. We don't have any ability or authority to move more money to grants or more money to loans, which actually can sometimes be a challenge for us. And post-COVID, or I guess we're still in the pandemic, so through this phase, we don't have a lot of flexibility to adapt quickly to a COVID world and the requirements that our citizens face in dealing with the pandemic. So that being said, we're pretty excited. We've moved through our staff was, we were staffed up in October, and that's when I started, and our program manager, Jeff Takahashi, started. Also, Russ started about the same time, I think. Russ, didn't you? I'm gonna call him out here a little bit.
Yep, almost the same time, almost identical, right at the end of October.
Yep. And so our first task was to jump right into rulemaking, because we couldn't do anything without doing some rulemaking. So we started that process, started our stakeholdering, and simultaneously, and with the help of the existing traditional programs staff, we were able to roll out a $500,000 planning grant application cycle. So we awarded 9 applications at that time, and that was strictly for planning, and with the hopes that we could start to develop a pipeline for construction. So that was kind of the goal there. Once we made it through rulemaking, which was actually May, we are finalizing our construction program. We will have our construction program, the application cycle will open July 13th, pending board authorization. It'll be open for 8 weeks, and we believe at this point we will be awarding sometime in October. The interesting things about our statute and the way we have to award is that the UTC does have some oversight. So once we get applications in, the UTC will evaluate those applications. And then we also have what in statute is called an objection process. I don't really think of it as a negative, and objection kind of carries a negative tone. I think it's a great opportunity for folks to engage in conversation around what services exist and what providers have planned for those areas. So with the objection process, an applicant, a provider may object to a proposed project area and say, you know, we already deliver services at those speeds, or we don't, but we're planning to, and we'll have services within 2 years. So another important aspect about our program is that it's very specific in our statute that we are working to fund projects in unserved areas. And unserved in our statute is 25.3 or less. So anything below that is within our ability to fund a project. CURB, the Community Economic Revitalization Board, is still funding broadband projects, and they consider their funding area is underserved. So they would do anything above and beyond. It's also important to note that Russ's office, the state broadband office, sets the goals for the state, the speed goals for the state. And we, as the broadband, the PWB broadband program, will work to develop applications and approve applications that are really meeting those goals that are defined by Russ's office. So that's part of the collaboration piece that we feel is really important. He sets the tone, he develops the guidance, and then the broadband program works to make sure that the projects that we're funding meet those goals, and with the ultimate purpose of serving the end user. Yeah, Russ.
No, I'm talking out loud and I keep forgetting I'm not muted. I'm sorry.
No problem.
Hey, Shelly, you're doing amazing. Keep up the great work.
Yes. Well, Russ, jump in anytime. And by the way, if you have any questions on the call, feel free to jump in. Oh, I see one here, actually, Sharon. You have satellite and you're 3 to 6 seconds behind. I get it. I'm actually right now in Astoria, and I am working from a Verizon signal and hotspotting in. I hope that you can hear me pretty well. But it's a perfect example of some of the lengths that you have to go through in Washington and unserved areas to just try to get connected. And with COVID, the requirements for broadband and the need for broadband has changed dramatically. What has also changed, sadly, is our ability to fund these projects. So currently we have just under 18 million, so about 8.1 million for grants and about 9.1 million for loans. And we're really at this point anticipating that at least for the next biennium, there may not be any additional funding for construction. We hope that's not the case, but we're anticipating that we're probably not going to have a lot of new dollars for construction. And what that means is in our statute, we're able to fund for rural, tribal, and distressed and severely distressed areas. We can fund up to 90% or $5 million for a project, and for non-distressed areas, we can fund up to 50% or $2 million. And when you start adding up the cost of broadband in these projects, that's not going to go a long way. We're not going to be able to fund to need in the state of Washington. The need probably is around $2 billion. We've already identified over $85 million in need, and we're just not going to meet it. So, you know, we're not giving up hope that we will get additional funding, but we want to be realistic. And one of the things that we can do in the interim is really work with our stakeholders and our partners to develop a pipeline. So looking at planning, how can we support your planning efforts? How can we ensure that when we do have construction money again, we have projects that are ready to go so we can get users online as quickly as possible. And I think that's our focus. And that is one of the things in the statute that isn't really addressed. How do we plan projects, and how do we deliver services, and how do we keep that pipeline going? And I think it's an unmet need, and I think that's kind of an area that we can focus on. And it's certainly something that can be supported with a little bit less funding. The other thing that with regard to COVID is that our statute doesn't provide us a lot of, it doesn't give us the ability to be nimble and address need as quickly as we would want to. So there are some things that we would like to look at maybe next session that will allow us to get our money out to communities faster and get people online faster. So any questions? I'll stop right now and see if there's any questions out there. And Russ, did you have anything you want to add that I've maybe missed?
No, I think you're good, Shelley. And you know, how can these communities help? I'll talk a little bit about that when it's time. But I think you outlined the program well.
Yeah, and one of the things that I would ask of all of you, and Russ will probably cover this too, is that I think it's really important that if you have broadband projects that you're planning, or you have a construction need and you know that you have a project that's ready to go, if you'll let us know, we'll add that to our list of projects. We want to be able to demonstrate clearly the need for broadband in the state of Washington. And Russ is working really hard now to get the data. And so anything that you can do to support him and that we can do to support him, so that we have a really clear picture for the state of Washington and its broadband needs. And this is something that we can demonstrate to those funding sources too. So if there aren't any additional questions, I'm going to go ahead and pop it over to Russ. Does that work?
I think that works. Go ahead, Russ.
Thank you.
It works for me. And hello, everyone. It's an honor for me to be able to be here to speak with you. And Shelley, thank you for the good presentation on PWB. It's been an awesome opportunity to collaborate with organizations, and I see Scott Hutzel's on here as well. So we'd be remiss not to say hi to Scott, given that he's got some influence on the Public Works Board.
Yes,
but,
I didn't notice Scott. Thank you very much for pointing that out, Russ. Hi, Scott.
There he is. And then we have our troublemaker Wes McCart on here too. So we should probably honor Wes as well. So anyway. I'm excited to be here, and I thought just really quickly it might be easier for me just to kind of go through. I recently had to do a presentation to one of the Senate committees, and I would love to just run through that slideshow with you real quick, just to talk on the high points, if that works for you all. All I need is one head shake, and do you give me a head shake? There you go. Okay, I got a head shake. So in that case, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and see how this works. Oh no, that's the wrong one. There it is. This one right here. Let me see if it works. Can you all see the, hang on, slideshow?
Yep, looks good, Russ.
And from beginning, boom, you got it?
Yep, we're good.
Hey, and Shelley, you'll get to see this too for the first time as well. So I got an opportunity to go in front of the Senate ENET committee about a week and a half ago, and they asked for a little presentation on broadband. So I'll give you the same dog and pony, and then we can have a little conversation afterwards about how cities can, or counties can be a part of this conversation. So obviously I've got the run up of all the stuff commerce, because I, as a governor appointee, I also sit in the Department of Commerce. So I'm kind of straddling the two. They're not quite certain what to do with me just yet, but I sit in between the two and work next to Shelley there in the Commerce building, and it works rather nicely for our ability to collaborate. So exciting to do that. So on the 5511, the Senate bill, here are the important things that we have to remember. We had some very specific legislative deliverables: 2024, 2026, 2028. I want you just to stare at the 2028 one, because it stands alone by itself. It's 150 symmetrical to every person in the state. That's a big, big goal. As a matter of fact, it's probably the most aggressive goal in the country right now. Do I think we can get there? I'm uncertain right now, but am I going to try because it's my legislative mandate? Absolutely. So everything I do is really built around this 2028 goal of 150 symmetrical. For those of you that need a little bit of info on symmetrical, that means 150 megabit down, 150 megabit up. There's only a few technologies in the world that allow for that to happen. And currently the most productive technology, effective technology in allowing that to happen, is fiber. So I really am focused on seeing what we can do to get fiber infrastructure out as far as we can. That said, I'm technologically agnostic about last mile deliverables where economic models do not make sense for fiber, because it's an expensive build. So we're really working toward that goal. By setting the goal, by this state setting the goals of 150 symmetrical, it really eliminates the 2024 goal of 25.3, because 25.3 infrastructure does not lead to 150 symmetrical service. And I would contend that if I've got a goal of 2028 to get to a certain technology, I want to build technologies to allow me to have that deliverable in place. So these are the goals of the state. I also have the opportunity to suggest some policies in collaboration with the folks that I work with. That shows the challenge that we set a goal of 25.3 by 2024, and then this difference between 2024 and 2028. There's a significant change in technology and strategy around those two. So what I'd like to do is try to level this line out, not make it such a dramatic bump from 2024. So we'll be working on trying to define speeds. As Shelley said, we have the opportunity to help continue to define what's served and unserved in the state. We will be working to try to flatten this line versus, flatten the curve to 150 versus allowing it to come at this dramatic bend in 2024.
Hey, Russ,
The other
can I just-
definition, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to jump in and say our goal with the Public Works Board is to fund projects that will get us, that are scalable at least to that 2028 goal.
Yeah, it's fun to be working closely because that way then we set our funds up together with our goals, and we really are a state that's forward thinking, and it's an exciting time to be here. The other definition is anchor institutions by 2026 gigabit speeds. We have also set and defined, and I talked with the Washington Association of Cities today. Is that a correct? And in that discussion, one of the things that we've also defined is unserved business corridor qualifies as a entity. So any community has a business corridor. That business corridor right now, if it doesn't have at least 1 gigabit provider to that business corridor, in our current definition, it's unserved. So keep that in your brain, county folks, as you're sitting there thinking about the municipalities and communities in your counties. If there are towns that do not have gigabit connectivity going through their business corridor, they would be considered unserved by our current definitions. I'll talk more about that as we go or answer questions. One of the things that I really want to talk about is the fact that there's a lot of things we already know, and I'm tired of repeating the givens. The givens are broadband's important. The givens are broadband and education right now. There's a gap. The broadband and telehealth is going to be important. We know all these things. We don't need to continue to reiterate that. What we need to start to talk about is how are we going to solve the problem? And that's what our office is working on right now, is to continue to focus on how do we solve the problem and how do we get there in a way that's collaborative across the state. We believe that there's a life cycle to broadband and how it happens. And the first stage is the planning stage, and this is where the counties come into a significant play. In the planning stage, we need to plan at the community level up. And when I talk about community, it can be the county, it can be the community of AARP, it can be the community of education, it can be the community of concrete, it can be the community of economic development people, whatever that community is, but it begins at the community level. And that community level starts to collaborate, coordinate, and plan. That's where you start bringing stakeholders to the table, you start getting institutional knowledge at your table, and you start to really get a group of individuals skilled in the discussion of broadband for those regions. The next step is you start to identify specific areas of need. Broad policy is not a win anymore. If you come in and say, my county's got crummy broadband, that doesn't help. What we need to hear is, my county in these areas have broadband that is less than the state defined served metric, and I can prove it by showing you on the map that the state stood up based on speed tests we're getting in an area, what the current speeds are and what the gap is. So in order for us to go and find funds, which is our next stage, we have to have specifically identified projects to fund, right? So what we're looking for at the State Broadband Office, and we're trying to help promote across all these different entities, is that we are defining very specific areas of need. So when you talk about Stevens County, as I'm working in Stevens County up there, we talk about Colville is connected downtown, but we might want to talk about 7 blocks outside of Colville to the west in this neighborhood that's X, Y, and Z. These 7 streets by these 9 blocks that are, in this area. Once we've identified that, then mapped that, we can talk more intelligently about what the need is. Then we can start to have a conversation with the providers about whether or not they're going to be able to serve those areas, how they'll do it. If they're not going to, we can go have competitive discussions. And if that's not working, we can have some other conversations around that. But what ends up happening is once we have specific projects, we've lined them up with funding, we get to the delivery stages, we ensure that these networks are delivering and accountable for what they've said they're going to do. And then in the end, you know, there's a lot of these areas that are going to need some sustainability, some sustainable funding metrics. And we are aware of that, and we'll be having some conversation around how we might go about that. But we believe this is kind of the broadband life cycle. This just kind of shows a bunch of the collaborations we're currently having with the broadband office. You know, obviously just a number of folks here. I have been very, very surprised and just I'm humbled by the amount of collaboration that goes on in the state amongst partners. I think it's very beneficial in a time when we've seen what we've seen with the COVID pandemic. You saw the drive-in Wi-Fi project that was stood up in this state. It was stood up by a majority of the entities on this sheet that you're looking at here. Everybody came to the table and said, how can we help? What can we do? And I'm proud to say that we've stood up one of the most compelling drive-in Wi-Fi hotspot programs in the country, is being recognized on a national level by a number of folks as to the efforts that were put forward. But it was a heavy lift of many, including some of the folks here on this call. So this is a great time to be in the position we're in with the collaborative entities that we have. When we talk about this mapping initiative, and Shelley mentioned the fact that my office is going to be really directed around data. We've got to get data. We've got to collect good data so we can talk intelligently and not in broad stroke about this. These are the kind of things that we'll be standing up on a statewide map. You'll see crowd speed test data. You're going to see some generic speed test data that comes from the MLabs Corporation. We'll overlay with some of the 477 data, some of the awarded areas, some of the areas of opportunity. You'll see some of the current networks that are on there. We'll be building a map that allows us a one-place location for all things broadband and broadband importance. And you'll see that coming out of the office. Some of this stuff will be public-facing, some of it won't. This is the way we think it needs. Oh, go ahead, Shelley.
Yeah, I was going to say the mapping is such a critical piece to the work that we all do in broadband, because of the requirement for our projects to be in unserved areas. And that's a heavy lift for communities. So the work that Russ is doing with regard to mapping is going to serve us all in the state of Washington really, really well. It'll make our job funding projects easier too.
Yeah, and I'll talk more about, and we'll share the link and everything here in just a minute. But thanks, Shelley. It's the most critical thing that we're going to be doing here in the next year. We feel like the program needs to go this way. I need to, you know, my background, I didn't get to talk about that, is I was a CLEC. I built a CLEC, which is a competitive carrier, which is a baby CenturyLink, I guess, for lack of better terms, in Western Colorado, northern New Mexico. We're out to about 17,000 customers, and we serve most of the hardest to reach rural places in Colorado and northern New Mexico. So I understand the game, and I understand the incumbent position, and I understand private investment, and I understand the fear that private providers have around public investment and how it plays. But this state is showing that private investment is actually a good thing. And if it's done well and it's done surgically, it can be a nice added benefit to a state asset inventory. So what I contend that we would do is, in an unserved or underserved area, the first place we go to is the incumbent provider. We want to honor their investment. And I know that hurts some of you guys to hear that, but it's what we have to do. It's the right thing to do. You go to the incumbent provider. If the incumbent provider says, no, we're not going to do it, you ask them, why are you not going to do it? They say it's no funds, not viable, other. How can we help? You know, I'm just not interested. Great, we'll move on. At least that ship sailed and we've defined it and we can move on. If they say, yes, they're going to do it, when, planning, process, how can we help? Same kind of deal. So we believe this is the path forward that allows us to start to define how we're going to do this and not get clouded up by, well, I was thinking about something, or, you know, hey, we were going to do something there. My goal is to, you know, currently we're in unprecedented times, and there's unprecedented funds getting ready to come down the pipe, I think, to broadband and infrastructure in general. And so what we have to do is be prepared to receive those funds. And again, in order to prepare ourselves to receive the funds, we have to be able to talk intelligently about projects that are ready to be built. Currently, there's an initiative on the federal level in front of the Rural Development Opportunity Fund to fund in advance of the reverse auction any fiber project that's shovel ready that can be done within the next year, right? So in my opinion, there's going to be more of those types of opportunities. So we have to have shovel ready projects sitting on our shelves. BWB will end up with more money down the road. And when they get more money, it's going to behoove you to be prepared to be positioned to ask for that money in a way that is congruent with what their programs are going to offer. Currently, you know, we've really poorly performed in the federal funds acquisition here, especially around broadband infrastructure. The one that's most apparent and most glaring is $1.2 billion have left the chute from USDA Reconnect in the last year and a half. Washington State has put 4 total applications forward, and we've received 1 positive application for $2.4 million out of 1.4 billion, 1.2 billion, something like that. So the challenge, in my opinion, is that we did not get enough applications or prepare people enough or help them on the technical feasibility side of it enough to get in front of the funds that are going to be there. I contend that's probably one of our other bigger initiatives is we've got to help get folks prepared to be at the table when the funding opportunities open and close. These are just things that we're currently supporting around the state. A lot of county stuff you'll see. A lot of counties are recipients of some of the good money that's come out of CURB and PWB on feasibility studies. I'm not a tremendous fan of the feasibility studies. I do believe a lot of them come down to less than stellar deliverables and just kind of talk more in general terms, and I'm not a fan of that. I'd like to see more of those feasibility studies define shovel-ready projects and make that happen, and I'll be working on some of that here within our office as well. This is budget stuff. You guys don't need to see that. Go ahead. Shelley, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to add that that's another point where we've collaborated with the State Broadband Office in developing a different model for how we conduct planning. The first phase being the outreach portion with the broadband action teams, which is a model that Russ is really promoting. I think you have a super bat, right? Something like that, Russ?
Something like that.
Yeah. You know, and that's really getting the community involved, and then following up with a plan for construction. And that's hopefully what we do is, you know, taking it rather than just getting a plan that says, yes, you can do broadband, but we want to fund plans that get you to a construction ready project. And so that's the goal for us in the future as we get more dollars, really taking you from feasibility to planning to construction. And that will be in coordination with the State Broadband Office.
Thanks, Shelley. So what we know is the state is going to be in a deficit to the tune of many billions, as is going to be evident by my day off next Monday, and then my day off the Friday following, and the day off the Friday following that, and the day off the Friday following that, all without pay. So we're going to see some challenges, and so we're not going to have the funds here for the infrastructure we need. I anticipate that if we were to build fiber to the home to the 884,000 homes that do not have fiber in this state, we'd be looking at somewhere between $2 and $3 billion. So we have to chase federal funds. Rural Development Opportunity Fund, the FCC reverse auction, which we had a great meeting with one of our stellar BAT teams in Stevens County and Commissioner McCart and his group, with the opportunity to host Chairman Pai of the FCC to share with him that potentially some of his maps are incorrect and that we may have better information on this side. And we'd certainly like to be considered for some of those federal funds, because the RDOF is going to be about $20.4 billion. The next round of Reconnect is going to be $600-700 million. And then after that, we'll probably see some stimulus funds to the tune of multiple trillions. And if that's the case, we need to be in line. We need to be prepared to get some of those funds. I'm a big, strong advocate for trying to get those funds to the state so the state can distribute it and give it to programs like Shelley's and programs like CURB and others, to where we can do better. We can identify more clearly what the needs are in the state. Coordination, blah, blah, blah. There it is. That's my show. And you know, this is kind of one of my favorite statements, is what gets measured gets done. And that's why I think data is going to be one of our most compelling pursuits in this next short period of time. So there you have it. I'm going to stop sharing, and I think we're going to be open for questions now.
Russ and Shelley, there was a question about speed tests, and so I've directed them to the broadband.wa.gov to take your speed test. So you might want to talk about that.
So I've got it. There's a page at broadband.wa.gov that has a little bit of information on our program, and then about halfway down the page, there's a great big go button. If you hit the big go button, you'll get a speed test taken at your location, and then to the right, there's a little survey that you'll fill out and include your information so we can record that and put it in our map. And if you go to broadband.wa.gov and you go to the right-hand side of the page by the go button, there's a show test results or show map results. You click on that, you open it up, and there's a really cool map in there with a dashboard. You can drill down on areas. You can speak intelligently about your region. What's great about the map is it allows the community to get behind an initiative. I had the community of Frontier Air Park up by Snohomish County call me and say, we've got crappy broadband. I said, I can't quantify crappy. Let's do something better than that. Why don't you get on there and get a measurement for me? I've been able to measure their area. I've got a pretty strong confidence of data that's come out of there. And we're at about an 8x1. I would consider that unserved and prepared for any type of opportunity for shovel ready. So, and I am familiar with Test It. Yes, I am.
Great, thanks Russ and thanks Shelley. We have Councilmember Hughes raising his hand in person and online. So Councilmember Hughes, go for it.
Well, this is my favorite subject in the entire world. And Russ, I just spoke with Jerry Lawler from T-Mobile, and he said he knew you.
He does.
So again, I want to offer any insight that our county in San Juan could provide. We have a combination fiber to the home build out that our power co-op is doing that's overlaid with I like to call it a LTE wireless mesh. Maybe that's not the right term. We produced a joint use wireless ordinance a few years back that lets us share power poles without having to go through the whole cell phone process. And most of our receivers are in the trees, so we're able to kind of camouflage everything. But you know, I've got up to a gig at the home and 200 megabytes of our LTE. So I'd love to help share it. It was a really great project that our local power co-op put together. And it was we were fortunate because Paul Allen sold us a megahertz section, 700 megahertz section, but it has been a game changer for us, especially in this pandemic where we've been so reliant on tourism. It's allowed a lot of our second and third homers to come and work remotely. So if I can provide any assistance to either Russ or Shelley or to the rest of our organization, please let me know. It's a really cool platform. So technically in San Juan County, in almost every place, you can be connected to your same account either at home or as you move around the county. It'll open up a lot of really great things for our county when it comes to auditing out in the fields for building permits. Anyway, as always, I've spoken way too much, but if I can help or we can help in any way, it's a really great model.
I'll be in touch, Rick. Thank you.
And I will too, because one of the things that we want to develop for all of our users or our potential partners is a resource page, best practices, where folks can go and get information and find solutions that might work for them. So I'll be in touch also.
Great, and the best thing for us is that we've been able to control every aspect. I say we, our power co-op and the ISP is only in our county. So while we don't control it at the county level, it's all the same neighbors working together. So when we have an outage, it's not trying to call some company in Louisiana. It's my neighbor next door who goes and fixes it. So it's and again, because of the way you don't have to get a permit to put a power pole in the line in the ground. With our joint use wireless, they just had to give us a mechanical permit to attach something to the top that promised it wouldn't roll over. So, you know, it has allowed us to put up 36 poles without going through that cell tower process, but also avoiding a look and feel of a line of technology. So you really can't see where our poles are anywhere, which is great.
Great, thanks, Councilmember. Others, I'm not seeing any comments in the chat box, but wondering if others have any questions they'd like to pose to Shelley and Russ, or any comments perhaps Our WASEC members who work on public works or broadband. Any comments from you folks?
That was easy.
That means we're just getting better at it, right, Russ?
Where everybody's asleep, or
No,
you know.
Oh, sorry. I have a question if I can.
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead,
This
Commissioner.
is Helen Price Johnson from Island County, and I was listening to a speech from Congressman Rick Larson recently where he was talking about the reauthorization of a transportation bill in his committee that included some broadband. Are you aware? I didn't get a chance to follow up with him about that, but they are reauthorizing one of a major transportation funding bill, passenger ferries and all kinds of other things, but broadband was listed as well. Had you heard anything about that, and what other national or congressional infrastructure funding are you looking at that we might help advocate for?
Yeah, on the Department of Transportation, I'm working with WashDOT on some connected autonomous vehicle stuff, but I was unaware of some specific funding language. So I'll be pursuing that and looking into that a little bit more. But on the federal level, currently the big funds are USDA and the Rural Development Opportunity Fund. The next big one will be whatever they do. If they author a stimulus package like 0809 where they had the Recovery Reinvestment Act, we'll see a big bunch of funds there. What I need you guys to advocate for is let's not just automatically throw those funds into the FCC traditional funding methodology. And the reason I say that is Ferry County, Stevens County, and Pend Oreille County currently on the FCC maps are 100% served and do not qualify for any federal funds. So if those funds fall into those hands, we will not see any of those funds in the areas that most desperately need it. So I need advocacy on your part to say, the states know better, get them the funds and allow them to make some decisions with those funds. We'll disperse those funds in the programs that we have in the state and make certain that money gets down to the areas of need.
Yeah, our county shows 98%. Thank you.
Hey, Jamie,
This is Jane. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Jane.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut anybody off. This is Jane Wall, and I work on public works and infrastructure with the Association of Counties, and I'm newly working on broadband, so I'm quite green. And you may have actually answered this question in your last answer, but as counties, what's the best way we can get engaged and involved in the policy conversation around broadband so that we can help really further public policy that's going to allow all of us, the best possible outcome here?
I'll give my thoughts, and then Shelley, you can give yours. And Jane, I apologize again for missing our Tuesday meeting. So I said it out loud, so that my penance has been paid. On the
no worries.
On the policy side, it's anything we can do to expedite builds and make certain that builds are more efficiently done. One of the things that I think counties can get behind, and I was a big advocate for it, and I had good partners in Wyoming. Another thing I didn't tell you before I came here, I stood at the broadband office in the state of Wyoming, is that counties really rallied around some of the dig once policy stuff. So when you have subdivisions coming in, that if the subdivision doesn't provide some additional conduit for future use, bad policy if we're not helping dictate some of that. And I met with the Association of Cities today, and same conversation with them. I think that's the #1 policy we as a state need to just rally around and get this thing behind us, because that's a simple one, and it's one that we really should get under our belts, so that when we're digging up a county road, a city block, a sewer line, we've got some understanding of how we're going to throw down some infrastructure that 90% of the cost of delivering broadband is putting plow in the ground. So I would recommend that's one of the big policies we could get behind. I don't know what exactly the verbiage is, but I'm certain a couple of big brains in this room and a couple of big brains in a couple other rooms, we could probably put something together, be pretty compelling for the state of Washington. But I think any of those types of things, and as as Commissioner Hughes was talking about up in his area, you know, he's probably come up with some creative ways to leverage power poles, those kind of things. These are the things that are going to help us get that last mile connectivity out there and do good work. And those are my thoughts at this point in time. Shelley?
Yeah, a couple of thoughts from me. First, I think it's always really valuable if you have broadband planning going on in your county to participate in that activity. I think the perspective you have can be really valuable for those teams and the work that they're doing. And I think also for us being participating with us, we just are starting partners discussions. We started last week with a stakeholder workshop talking about, you know, where we go from here with regard to construction and some of the work that we might be doing next session with the Public Works Board broadband program. And having you in those conversations would be really valuable for us. And then being champions for broadband. You know, it's such a, there's such a demand, and then the cost of it can be overwhelming for our legislative members, and just having those champions, talking to them about, you know, what's needed in your county, where those gaps are. I think that's really valuable for us. And speaking of the gaps, you know, when you have information about those gaps or projects, you know, funneling that information up to us so we can get some really good data sets. I think that's pretty valuable. And then Helen, you, with regard to your question, we're having a meeting on the 30th, and Russ is in that meeting. Scott will be in that meeting, and the governor's person from DC is also attending that meeting, and we can reach out and ask her some questions about what they're hearing on the congressional level about any broadband stimulus projects. So we can follow up with you on that after Tuesday.
I can speak directly to that, Shelley. On the DOT, there's been a change of guard there and a change of the philosophy there, and they are aggressively coming to the table saying, what can we do to be better partners? And so on the Whidbey Island deal, I think there's an opportunity, if there's a roadblock there, that I can help get in the middle of that conversation and swing a little bit of the state hammer at it and see if we can't crack that nut. So please feel free to reach out and we can talk a little bit more about that. I'm really into the Whidbey Island thing. Actually, Whidbey Telephone has put forward a USDA Reconnect grant application. They're in consideration right now. So could be some good things going on out there.
Great, thank you. Commissioner McCart, you have your hand up. If you could unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'd like to give a shout out to Shelley and in particular Russ, especially since you mentioned me a couple times on here. You know, I do want to say that the tested app, we ran the tested app up here. We had great participation on it. I think it was helpful to show the FCC that their mapping was inadequate. However, the pilot program that Russ helped get us into for the mapping right now, I'll tell you, it is amazing. It literally goes right down to the parcel level, shows the provider, shows the speed, shows how inadequate the speeds are. Even where we have good broadband service here in Stevens County, the speeds are really, really low. And I really want to say to everybody that when we talked to Chairman Pai from the FCC, he was very interested in that mapping. And one of the things we emphasized is, please don't make us challenge your map. Please help us change the way you're mapping. So maybe Russ, maybe you can speak to ways that we can get the FCC to move that mapping a little bit more.
Yeah, thanks, Wes. So if I can share my screen for one more minute, I'll show exactly what we're talking about here in Stevens County, the beta that we did there that I am now going to bring to the rest of the state so we can talk more intelligently about the problem. I just need that, I need that screen share love again, if that's possible. I promise to be quicker this time. I won't take up so much time this time. The map that I want to share with y'all is Where is that sucker? Where did it go? Oh man, I thought it was right here. This one. Now, I don't know if we can see it. Let me see if we can see that. Oh, there it is. Here we go. So in Stevens County, we stood up a beta test to just check this whole speed test deal, and it's hard to challenge data when you have it at this level of accuracy. If I take a satellite view, it's kind of fun to do the satellite view because you can really see, you know, these areas. Red and black is basically unserved. Yellow, red, and black are really unserved. Green is where service starts to be considered. So when you think about Stevens County from a standpoint of the federal groups now saying that Stevens County is 100% served, I would contend that as we drill down on areas in Stevens County, we see some very compelling data that says potentially you're not correct. You know, as you get across these dots, it says, you know, this one was 1.3 by 1.9. This one was 4.0 by 5. You know, this one over here was this was a 23. Oh, there's a yellow in there. That's why. But here's a 0.6. You know, here's you know, you see HughesNet out here. The cool thing is too, on the data side, you can start to kind of span over different organizations and see exactly, you know, where those organizations are. I gotta kind of do this here. As we get into Colville and Kettle Falls area here, green is good, red, black is bad. And then if I go across, you can see Charter pretty good. Everything's green where they are. But the minute you get out of there, currently Stevens County is not eligible for any funds because this company here states they have 100 megabits symmetrical to all of Stevens County. Well, if you look at the test results over there, there's 38 that we've gotten on those red dots, and not one of them shows anything near that. So some interesting, compelling data coming out of this that I think will allow us to have a platform of more intelligent challenging. And that will then also help, you know, when PWB says, hey, is that project actually, in an area that you can prove is unserved? I think we have some pretty compelling data here to help derive some of those conversations to say, you know, if this neighborhood out here really wanted something, we could come up with some way to effectively do that. We could probably assume that fairly accurately that that's a hard area and unserved. So anyway, this is the map. It'll be going up for the state. What you're seeing here is kind of the back end. That's not what everybody will see. Most people will see a different map. Most people will see the state broadband map, which is this one here, the broadband dashboard. I'll show you this just so if there it is. Let me share one last screen so you can see it. This is the one that you guys will all see because it's a little bit more, it's more pretty and it's easier to read. So all the data you saw in that last one will be pulled over into this screen. So you can start to talk about areas of need. You can watch the dashboard on the right-hand side, kind of drill down. Remember I was talking about that community frontier air park in Snohomish? Well, here we are, you know, and we can start to see, ooh, we're getting some pretty good data samples right here in this group. Now the dots go away as we get closer because I don't want to be creepy with folks on the public side. So, but on my back end, I can see this all the way down to your basement, you know, so, but you can see where the average speeds are now pretty much fairly well represented over here at 9 by 1. So that's a pretty easy way for us to start to say these are areas that we've identified are needed. So that's the mapping, broadband.wa.gov. Appreciate any help, and thanks, Wes, for the opportunity to share more on that.
Yeah, and I should add that that mapping data can limit what you counties can do when seeking federal dollars, but with PWB dollars, our only restriction is that we need to show that you're unserved or receiving less, 25.3 or less, but we don't rely on that mapping. We'll ask you for your own data that demonstrates that the proposed project area is unserved. So that 477 data that's inhibiting folks from applying for federal funds doesn't apply for our program.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Hughes, you had your hand up again.
And I just wanted to give a perspective to the 150 megs that Russ mentioned. And it sounds really great to start, but we've got about 17,000 people in our community and maybe about 6,000 or 5,000 LTE customers. And I assume the 150 was LTE based. We have blown through 200 megs like that. and we're a pretty small community. And we have a lot of extra capacity on the fiber to the home, but it's a really great place to start. But just realize everyone's utilizing the same thing at the same time when it's an LTE system. So it's a great point to start about, but think bigger when that's the mistake we made, is that we capped it at 200, and we can't hold that capacity and fast enough to have the fiber installed.
Great, thanks. And I see that Russ shared the link to that website in our chat box too. So folks want that link, you can look at the chat box and jot that down. Any final questions, comments for Russ and for Shelley before we let them go? Not seeing any in the chat box, not seeing any hands. All right, I'm gonna say we're good to go. Onward, says Commissioner Price Johnson.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Russ and for Shelley, for joining us. Much appreciated, and we look forward to continued conversations around broadband. Thanks.
Thank
Mitch,
you very much.
if you can bring up this, oh, you already did. Great, wonderful. Feel free to move on to the next slide. So some quick updates and resources for you all moving forward. So just a reminder with the new order from Governor Inslee and Secretary Weissman on masks, some mask guidance information. The coronavirus website has a lot of resources. At the very bottom of their mask page is an FAQ link to the Department of Health. I think is very, very helpful in a lot of questions that you may be getting from community members. So I would encourage you to go to that website. The Lieutenant Governor is also has a mask challenge. So if you are getting questions around people who want to sew and donate masks, that is a great resource to direct those folks to, so they can create masks for their community members. I think Kitsap and I think Thurston counties were both recently featured in their community efforts to distribute masks. I think that was really cool. So that is great. We're also getting some more clarification on some of the issues within the orders. WSBO has asked for some clarification around enforcement. And so once we get that, we'll share that information as well. Next slide, Mitch. So updated things on our website for you all. There is an updated U.S. Treasury memo that was updated June 24th. That is on our coronavirus website. The link is below. And then there was also a local government memo from the governor's office around Safe Start. So they've issued state guidance for agencies for reopening and then sent a memo to local governments, not guidance, but as a way to connect local government work around reopening to additional resources, and just kind of reinforcing that there's an important role local government has in serving the public. So those two documents are available on our website. There's the link. A lot of business toolkits and guidances are being updated. The link is there with AWB as well. Melanie, did you have anything else to update on?
Sure, sort of, a couple of things. And sorry, I was just choking on my water, so I apologize if I'm craggy. So special session rumors, we were pretty solidly convinced a week ago that we were definitely having a special session in August. Now we have been told by a legislator who would know that we'll know for sure about August next week sometime. And we heard from another legislator who would definitely be in the know that it may not happen until November. So we are back to really having no idea what, if anything, is going on with the special session. So that's that. I see we have a question about OPMA and reconciling that with the governor's, with the phases with the governor's proclamation. We are working on that. We know that the governor asked to have the OPMA proclamation extended until September 1st. We have been talking with the governor's council, the second in command, I guess, and had a conversation with him and AWC, the cities, earlier this week. And he said he would work on it. And then subsequent to that, I just got a message today that the Senate Republicans have reached out to the governor's top counsel and asked her to look into doing the phasing. So I think that's really great news that the Senate Republicans have asked for that. I hope that that is a signal that maybe they'll go ahead, and if they get what they want, which is also what we want, go ahead and be willing to extend this for longer than the 2 week by 2 week that we've been doing. September would be great. So conversations with Catherine, the governor's lawyer today, she was looking at doing the, just putting it in there. So it, you know, if you're in phase five, we wish, in phase 2, then you could have up to 5 people together. And if you're in phase 3, you could have up to 50, and still making sure that that remote option was available. And we don't have a guarantee from her that it's going to happen, but we've certainly made our support for that idea very clear, and we don't know for sure when she's going to get back to us on it. But I feel like this is really good movement from where we were probably about a week ago, when I was probably expressing my frustration over this to you. So that's what I know about that. And then Commissioner McCart says, we do not see any new proclamation regarding masks on the governor's webpage. That is because it is actually a proclamation from the Department of Health. It came from Secretary Weissman. So I would assume that it would have been linked on the governor's page, but it actually wasn't a governor order. It was the Secretary of Health's order. And so it's also not subject to the 30-day review by the legislature. It is has an indefinite date at this point. But we can send you, maybe Jamie, while I'm talking, you can dig that up real quick, and if it's easy to get to, put it in the link. And then, are there some counties and cities that do not want OPMA? I assume you mean the proclamation that says that you can't meet unless you're meeting in virtually or remotely. The only thing that I have heard is that for the phase 3 counties and potentially cities that are that would have fewer than 50 people in a room and can still do the social distancing that's necessary, if they can't get acknowledgement that they should be able to do that, then they would prefer not to have the order, which of course is in, you know, not having the order would very much hurt the counties who can't meet because they're under the 5 or whatever. So we have to find some balance so both all counties in all phases can participate. And that's the only thing that I had heard, though, was needing either not wanting it or wanting it fixed. And I think we're on the road to having it fixed.
Melanie, I'll just add that we put a copy of the Secretary of Health order in our COVID resource page, so you'll be able to access that with the link that's on the slide.
Okay. That's really the news I had for you all. I was going to mention the OPMA and the special session rumors. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to attempt to answer them, but otherwise, that was my update for you.
And then just a reminder for everyone too, that we aren't holding any meetings next week. but we'll have a new set of invites coming out for the month of July, so stay tuned for that. So enjoy the shortened week next week and the holidays, and we will talk to you all in July. Have a great weekend.
Real quick, I want to answer Commissioner Trask's question. Sorry, I couldn't get the mute off fast enough. People get to choose their furlough days. So, for example, our primary contact with the governor's office chose Tuesdays to be his furlough days, which means we have to move our weekly call to Thursdays. Russ, as you can tell, is pretty much going to take Fridays. And so it'll just be, the state won't close down. They'll just, on any given particular day, we may or may not have who we need.
Correct. And to add to that, Department of Health is taking off Mondays, except for their essential incident management. So yeah, it's gonna be a challenge because there'll be days when some folks are able to get back to us and other days they won't. So we'll just adapt like we do.
And the hard part about it too is for the exempt employees who normally, especially during this pandemic, will get in touch with you at 5, 6, 7, 8 o'clock, whenever it happens to be that the communication needs to happen. When you have to take a furlough, then you actually revert to an hourly employee, which means you cannot work more than, say, 32 hours, assuming you have a 40-hour work week and you're taking an 8-hour furlough, which means there's no overtime. So on those weeks when they're taking a furlough, if they don't get done, if they don't get the information to you that you needed before 5 o'clock, then you're just not going to get it. So it's actually worse than just taking one day off a week. It really means that their capacity to work as hard as they have been is going to be very limited for these next for this next month, while they have to do one day a week. So it's not great news there, but we'll make it work.
Yep. And yes, it is difficult when Department of Health does not work a full weekend. Right there with you. I know that's been a challenge for our local folks. So on that really great positive note, I do wish you all a great weekend. Thank you for joining. Thank you for sticking with us today. Enjoy the sunshine that this weekend will bring, and be safe. And we will, if we don't talk to you sometime next week, we will for sure talk to you in July. So thanks all, and be safe.